Art and war played a very interesting role during the 20th century. When most people think of war in the 1900s, they think of the two world wars that affected the entire century. Today, we'll be taking a look into the Vietnam War and the effects of social realism art. Social realism started in 1946, after Ho Chi Minh retreated north during the French-Indonesian communist resistance movement that spawned a new aesthetic based on national identity pitted against imperialism and colonialism. The Chinese were among the first to support this movement from the Vietnamese and would whip exiled French bourgeoisie artists into ideological self-criticism. Social realism was advocated in the 1948 Natural Cultural Conference. The Fine Arts College of Vietnam expansion was yoked to the Soviet Union during the doctrine of Marxist-Leninism. North Vietnamese artists were sent to study Soviet social realism art, and Soviet teachers were imported to teach at their school. Artists were recruited to accompany Viet Cong combat troops and wage war of resistance. Poster propaganda art became the prevalent North Vietnamese style, and artists were sent to live with peasants and workers and portray them in a favorable light. Artists also accompanied guerrilla soldiers into the field and carried their own weapons, dried food, as well as spent bombshell casings that they were used to protect their rolled-up artworks against the extreme, dangerous conditions. Paper and supplies were scarce. Ink might be mixed from gun grease and burnt pot scrapings. Some drew and wrote on the back of betel leaves. When paintbrushes ran out, pineapple roots were substituted. The color orange was mixed from turmeric or rust. Yellow was extracted from malaria medicine, and red from local rocks. Sketches had to be created on the fly beneath a sky discharging B-52 bombs. The war, for the most part, was kept out of Saigon, where French and even a smattering of American artistic influences prevailed until 1967, when riots broke out against the Americans. The Vietnamese War ended on April 30th, 1975, and the North Vietnamese Communist Party took control of the country. Thousands of South Vietnamese fled by boat. This spurred a new set of pressure on artists who stayed behind. Many destroyed their works in order to escape political retributions. By May, cultural workers were gathered into groups according to their specialties: literature, music, or performing and visual arts. Southern artists underwent 2 months of mandatory ideological re-education on Marxism and culture for 8 hours a day. Well-heeled Southern artists were stunned by gun-toting comrades orating on ideology for hours on end. The artists were ordered to paint ports, agriculture, and industry by extolling the glory of the worker. A common theme of social realism artworks in Vietnam was to show support for the military and depict the victory of the Viet Cong. This is exactly what the Welcome Liberation Army of Ho Chi Minh City by Huy Ton depicts. This painting is one of the most popular pieces of art to come out of communist Vietnam. In his painting, we can see soldiers and citizens alike interacting and celebrating the victory of the Vietnam War. There are 2 tanks in this painting, and around them are citizens standing, smiling and waving to the soldiers. There are multiple flags flying around. These are the flags of the Communist Party in Vietnam. This painting is very colorful and vibrant, but it has a red and orange tint to it, which are colors used in the communist flag. This work is clearly a piece of propaganda. It is depicting the military in a positive light, and the excited facial expressions and poses of the citizens suggest to the audience that the victory of the Communist Party is a cause for celebration. The soldiers interacting with the citizens could infer that they are friendly and are fighting for what the people want. Lastly, this is a social realism piece because it's depicting a real-life situation in a way that makes the Communist Party look favorable. Ko Tan Long Chau's work, Fight Till the End, is a brutally raw look at the travesty that was the Vietnam War. This 1967 painting was made for propaganda purposes from the North Vietnamese perspective. It was common for the both North and South Vietnamese government to commission artists to produce pieces which depicted their soldiers' struggles to fight and persuade South Vietnam to cease fire and unify their beloved country once again. The scene is painted on silk canvas, a common Vietnamese practice for the time. In the painting, we see a very young, frightened boy fighting for the country he loves dearly. The artist uses contrast of textures to highlight the soldier in the foreground, making him the primary focus of this painting, compared to the background being painted with mere brushstrokes to represent the foliage. This painting makes me think of how tough wartime is. This work oozes with melancholic tones, and the thought of children serving and risking their lives to protect their homeland is very saddening and a true representation of the desperation that is war. In conclusion, art production and war worked hand in hand together during the 20th century. As we've seen, North Vietnam used social realism art as propaganda to promote communist values. Our two art pieces are prime examples of just that. Tone's Welcome the Liberation Army was a vibrant and colorful look at the end of the war, with Viet Cong being victorious. Everybody happy and celebrating the rise of communism. Chow's Fight Till the End showed the viewer the brutal cost of continuing the bloodshed and pitting brother against brother. Both these works depicted real, everyday people in the context of communism as a solution to end the country's suffering.